This video was made possible through the support of my patrons. To understand the history of the Space Museum, broadcast between April and May 1965, you actually need to go back to nearly a year earlier, where David Whittaker was still the script editor. Having been impressed by the play early one morning, Whittaker commissioned its writer, Glyn Jones, to pen a 4-part sci-fi story for Doctor Who. However, during the writing process, David Whittaker stepped down, and he passed the job to Dennis Spooner, who wasn't quite as invested in the concept of the TARDIS team visiting a space museum, and he made a lot of edits and changes to Glyn Jones's script. This left the Space Museum in a bit of an odd place creatively, where it was originally conjured up by the previous showrunners and now found itself without any real defenders behind the scene, and it was just put after the epic Third Crusade historical and before the highly anticipated return of the Daleks, which would dominate the summer TV schedules. That could also be why Glyn Jones, when all was said and done, was not happy with the outcome, citing Dennis Spooner doing large rewrites of his script, mostly to take out the humour. The script also had its budget cut in order to try and make up for the financial strain that the Web Planet had put on the team, and also in anticipation for the 6-part epic The Chase. But we've seen great stories come out of worse scenarios, so let's back up and talk about the Space Museum. So the serial opens with the ending of The Crusade, which saw our main cast frozen in the TARDIS. They manage to wake up, and the Doctor shrugs off their wardrobe changes and he asks for a drink, which Vicky gets, but not before dropping the glass on the floor, only for the glass to reform and bounce back into her hand. Something strange is going on here. The Doctor, Vicky, Ian and Barbara arrive outside a space museum, but things are just a bit off. It's too quiet. The group don't even leave footprints in the sand outside. There are people inside the museum, but they can't hear them, nor can the group be heard or even seen. Even the artifacts in the museum can't be interacted with, their hands just go right through them. It's this first episode where the Space Museum peaks as a strange off-kilter mystery where the actual state of play of the main characters is put into question. It's not just what is this museum, who are the people in it, etc. It's more existential. The main characters don't even know what their actual state of being is, and the audience don't know what the story or the conflict is going to be for this 4-parter. It's not like the characters are eavesdropping on what's happening in the museum, they can't hear anything. We later learn that the actual villains of the story are the Morochs, these white-clad, widow-peaked guys walking around, but in the first episode, they just walk through a door. We have no idea what these guys are up to. There's also these people in black, the Xerons, who are much more prevalent in the first episode as they discuss something in the corridors, but we're not privy to anything. It's a great way to throw the characters and the audience out of step as they traverse these alien white corridors, leaving literally no footstep or imprint as they go.
Obviously they couldn't see us. I mean, we're strangers, our clothes are different. If they had seen us, they would have made some sign, however slight.
Right. We're invisible. That settles it.
Does it, my boy? Does it? Either that or we're not really here.
It's great. The story seems to start conventionally, with the TARDIS landing and the cast looking through the scanner at the cool models.
Oh, look! Spaceships!
It's only a model. Shh.
And then we establish the setting, the location.
Well, look! Look, you see where we've landed? On a museum.
A museum?
A space museum, yes.
He said it!
But after that, all bets are off. It's brilliant. The group even find the TARDIS, potentially one of the exhibits in the museum, but once again, they can't interact with it. The group then turn around and spot all 4 of them inside glass cabinets.
That's us. That's not models or pictures. That's us.
Yes. Exhibits in a space museum.
Can you explain it, Doctor?
The Doctor and Vicky are able to put the pieces together. When the TARDIS landed, the ship jumped a time track. Whatever that means, but it has resulted in the group looking at themselves in the future inside those cabinets, whilst echoes of themselves in the past can observe. Time realigns itself, however, making them tangible again, and the TARDIS and their future selves fade away, resulting in one of the show's greatest cliffhangers. No exaggeration.
They've gone.
Yes, my dear. And we've arrived.
This not only makes for a great moment, but it also lays really interesting groundwork for the future of this story. You see, what the Doctor and his friends have observed was a potential future where the TARDIS is taken from them and they wind up suspended and on display in this museum forever, with no hope of escape. Because of the TARDIS's mix-up in the fourth dimension, the group were given a glimpse of this potential future, and they have to now be very considerate with their actions just in case they wind up creating that future. They obviously want to avoid that potential future fate, but does that mean they just sit around and do nothing? That might not seem very proactive, but looking for trouble and exploring the museum further could end up with them in those glass cases. It's such an intriguing concept, which causes everyone to doubt their usual actions. The Doctor wants to explore, Vicky wants to protect the Doctor, Ian wants to throw himself into the action, and Barbara wants to be safe and steady. Any of these behaviours could end up backfiring on them, and they know it because they've seen a potential ending to this story. It's a great introduction to the serial, and a great episode of Doctor Who in general. However, to paraphrase the brilliant Rob Shearman, who defended this story in a feature on the story's DVD release, the story has 3 major problems, and that's episodes 2, 3 and 4, because all of this potential is mostly squandered. Firstly, there's the undercurrent of the cast trying to avoid their fate, but due to the nature of the story, it can't be a driving force. It's an underlying tension, because there has to be some antagonistic presence that can bring the group to that terrible fate. In this case, it's the Morochs, the guys who we saw earlier dressed in white, who run the museum, led by Lobos, played by Richard Shaw, and I think the actual idea and the concept behind the Morochs is really interesting, how they're this colonizing imperialist race who have basically peaked, they've done all they can do, and they're just sitting around in a museum that's based around their own past achievements. The Space Museum is a monument to their better days, and the Morochs here don't really have anything to do except maintain and upkeep it. The planet that they're on is Xeros, which belonged to the Xerons, the guys dressed in black with the second set of eyebrows, a really uninspired design. The Morochs built the tribute to their empire not on their own planet, but on one of the other worlds that they colonized, which is an interesting concept. Like, for example, the British don't put the spoils of their plundering and their colonizing in a museum in other countries, they keep it on their home soil, whereas the Morochs do it on a colonized world, likely out of some sort of way to twist the knife to the Xerons, but I'll admit that's 1000% headcanon on my part. They must be pretty good at what they do though, because they even have a Dalek from the planet Skaro as an exhibit. Well, to be technical about it, they have an empty Dalek travel machine on display, something which, for a moment, surprisingly frightens the Doctor.
So that's what a Dalek looks like.
Don't touch now.
What do you know about them, Vicky?
Only what I've read in history books, that they invaded Earth about 300 years ago, was it?
We were there, Vicky. That was one of the periods we visited.
I don't mind admitting, my boy, that thing gave me a start, coming face to face to it again.
Anyway, back to the Morochs. These are some interesting concepts, but in practice, they are terrible villains. Not only do they look ridiculous with their hairstyles, but they're also incredibly inept, as they manage to colonize entire worlds, but they can't catch 4 hapless trespassers. Now, they manage to capture the Doctor, well, strike that, the Xerons capture the Doctor, he manages to escape them by hiding inside the Dalek casing, which is wonderful.
I told them all, I am the master.
And then the Morochs capture him, and the Doctor runs absolute circles around Lobos, and no hate towards Richard Shaw, but this just isn't remotely an intimidating or impactful performance as the story's main villain. He has the Doctor strapped to a truth machine, but the Doctor is just able to use it to meme and post videos of walruses, and I swear this is true, a photo of William Hartnell in an Edwardian bathing suit.
What are these creatures?
Just some old friends of mine.
But these are amphibious creatures. You're not an amphibian.
Oh, I'm not, am I?
The Doctor's just a walking, talking shitposter. And yeah, Hartnell is terrific in this scene. I adore the low lighting on him and how, despite being restrained to this chair, he's able to outwit and outmaneuver Lobos. But I feel like there's maybe a way to give Hartnell a great performance and have the Doctor be fun and playful that did not completely remove the teeth from the story's main villain. I mean, come on Lobos, you're meant to be the head of this empire, and you're getting outsmarted by a man who can't even remember his lines.
I don't understand where the light comes from.
Oh, I think that might be just some fluorescent substance in the walls. Yes.
Nailed it. Also, speaking of brilliant Doctor moments, there's this scene where he's kidnapped by the Xerons and he's laying on the floor unconscious, but when the Xerons aren't looking, he opens his eyes and stares directly at the camera, presumably to let the kids at home know that he's okay. It's like children's theatre. Love it, love it, love it. But yeah, the Morochs just wander around the museum, acting totally ineffectually. One of them gets coerced by Ian into doing everything he asks. They're unable to find Barbara in a room with a pretty basic layout and practically no good hiding spots. And in the armory of the museum, it's protected by a computer that requires honest, accurate answers to like 10 questions.
Do you understand that all questions are to be fully answered? What is your rank? What is your name? Do you have the governor's permission to approach? Have you a requisition signed by the governor? What is its reference number?
But the computer is not only able to be hacked by a literal child, but then only requires 2 answers to give access to all of the Morochs' weaponry and means of defense over to the first eager revolutionary.
What is your name?
Vicky?
For what purpose are the arms needed?
Revolution!
Well done, Vicky!
Okay, so Vicky becomes friends with a group of Xerons who want to lead a revolution to get their world back. Here's the issue though. They're all so terrible. They're a group of dumb teenagers who are so ineffectual that they need encouragement and leadership from Vicky, who, once again, is literally a child. Also, fun fact, the guy who plays Tor, one of the Xerons who Vicky befriends, he's played by Jeremy Bulloch, who nearly 20 years from now would play Boba Fett in the Star Wars movies, which is awesome. But in this story, none of the Xeron actors are any good. Credit to these young actors for getting prominent hero roles in Doctor Who, but they look weak, they sound weak. All Tor does is just have his hands by his hips throughout the entirety of the story. They're just not very endearing, and their roles as generic revolutionaries don't make them compelling. It's even more disappointing when you consider how many times we've done this plotline before, where the Doctor and his friends have to help a group of revolutionaries. We've had the Thals, the French revolutionaries, the Menoptera, the people of Marinus. We're not even 2 seasons into Doctor Who, and this idea has not only been tried and tested numerous times, but the Space Museum isn't even a good or interesting version of that story. The only part of this serial that really stands out is that first episode, where the characters are trying to avert that fate, but that's a garnish. That's not something to dedicate an entire narrative around. I'm sure there are some people who are willing to be huge defenders and advocates of the Space Museum, like Rob Shearman for example, and they say that these points against the Space Museum are actually deliberate subversions. For example, the name of the species, the Morochs, It's only one letter away from the word moron. Lobos's name is leading to the word lobotomy, which is why he's so stupid. The Xerons are supposed to be ineffectual, and the conceit of changing the TARDIS team's future is a fun commentary on whether or not they should intervene. And if that's your interpretation, then awesome. I'm glad you could find something here in the Space Museum. However, I'm not sure how much of this is actually intentional. Maybe Glyn Jones's original script leaned more into these ideas and Dennis Spooner took it out, but I can only work with what I've got, and if the story was meant to be more subversive and meta, I think they really should have amped it up way more, make the Morochs even dumber, make the Xerons even more ineffectual. If it's meant to be a comedy or a subversion, why is it played so straight? The Xerons are so bad at resisting the Morochs' invasion that the Morochs don't even really bother to stop them. It feels more like Vicky is less helping them plan their revolution because they were done wrong by the Morochs, and more because Vicky is really bored and wants something interesting to happen. And then that revolution is entirely based on whether or not the Xerons can get a locked door open, and when the revolution does start, we've only seen a handful of Xerons before, then all of a sudden a load of them appear inside the museum. Where did they even come from? Were they just hiding in the basement the whole time? Basically, if your best defense of a story is entirely around ironic, subversive readings, more credit to you, but it's not really something I can get on board with unless the serial itself is also entertaining to watch on its own, and the Space Museum just isn't. For the most part, it's really boring. Also, if you want to make your own fun, do what I do, and just make funny edits with the footage.
Can you hold it?
Hurry up, it's heavy. Oh!
All right. Good. Hey, I wonder if it works, eh?
Chesterton.
There's also just some other really poorly executed elements that detract from everything else, like Barbara managing to escape a room filled with poison gas that she's knocked out by just getting better, and then leaving the room. In part 1, the skipping of the time track causes the Doctor and his friends to change their clothes, and the Doctor could not care less. He is utterly unfazed by all of this.
Doctor, we've got our clothes on.
Well, I should hope so, dear boy, I should hope so.
No, Doctor, our ordinary everyday clothes.
Well, upon my soul, yes. Yes. Now, isn't that extraordinary? Yes, we were wearing those cloaks and things, weren't we? Well, I must say it's going to save us a lot of bother changing. Now, let's see where we are, shall we?
Doctor, you can't dismiss it like that. We were standing here in 13th century clothes. We can't
Dear
suddenly...
boy, it's over and done with. Now, let's forget it.
But in part 2, Ian loses a button on his jacket, and the Doctor is deeply, deeply concerned about it.
You've lost a button.
Oh, so I have.
Lost a button. That's interesting. Yes, it's very interesting.
Doctor, why do you always show the greatest interest in the least important things, eh?
The least important things sometimes, my dear boy, lead to the greatest discoveries. Yes, you know, losing a button could change the future.
Oh, and this button? It's never brought up again. It's insane. The Doctor is taken away to be turned into an exhibit in part 2, which allowed Hartnell to take a holiday for part 3, so in part 4, Ian has to get Lobos to reverse the process which he started, something apparently the Morochs have never ever done before, and they don't know if it will work, even though it's their machine, their technology, and their museum. Anyway, it does work, but the Doctor and Ian have the tables turned on them, and they're threatened with the technology again. But because Vicky led a revolution, help arrives. Lobos is unceremoniously shot and killed, and the Xerons take the planet back. Okay, cool, great work, team. Also, the Xerons start emptying the museum and dismantling the building, but apparently the exhibits will be destroyed?
There, now,
But, Tor, surely it doesn't all have to be destroyed. Can't you use any of it?
Oh, we only want on Xeros what belongs to Xeros, Vicky. The rest will be broken up.
But it wasn't just the Xerons who were victims to the Morochs. There's items and possessions there from across all of the other worlds that the Morochs have colonised. What about those items? Can you imagine if people from Africa came to a British museum to get their stolen items back, and then on the way out decided to destroy everything in the museum from Asia or from South America? What the hell? It just shows that in execution, not a lot of thought has really gone into putting the story together, which is why I don't really buy the defense that it's ironically bad. It's just a bad story that has a really good opening part. I recommend watching part 1 and the scenes with the Doctor having fun in part 2, and then just skipping to the chase, because what remains is dull, uninspired, and not even very entertaining to watch. The sets are bland, there isn't a lot of set dressing to make the idea of a space museum come across as credible on screen, and while Mervyn Pinfield does some occasionally inspired work with the direction and the visuals, it's not enough to salvage this 4-parter, which almost seemed like it was destined from the start to be filler. However, to his credit, writer Glyn Jones would appear on screen 10 years later in the season 12 story The Sontaran Experiment, making him the first person to both write and act in Doctor Who. He also wrote the Target novelization, which I've not read, but I can imagine it being a much better format for a story of this type. However, something else noteworthy here is that the Daleks' cameo is not just relegated to them being a museum piece, but in fact one appears at the very end of the Space Museum Part 4, informing other Daleks that their greatest enemies are on the move.
They cannot escape. Our time machine will soon follow them. They will be exterminated. Exterminated. Exterminated.
Which leads to the next serial, a 6-parter, and also the end of William Russell and Jacqueline Hill's contracts, which they decided not to renew. Big changes are afoot next time, as the Daleks gain time travel capabilities and vow to pursue our heroes across time and space in The Chase. Or, if you've already seen my review from Daleksember, we'll be jumping ahead to the Season 2 finale, where a meddling monk is changing history, and there's more to him than meets the eye, in The Time Meddler. I'll see you next time. Hey folks, thank you so much for watching my review of the Space Museum, and oh god, it's so bright outside, you can tell it's springtime now. As usual, if you liked this review, be sure to hit that like button, it really helps me out. Leave a comment with your own thoughts on the story or the review, or just something to help appease that almighty YouTube algorithm, and also subscribe so you can keep up to date on other Doctor Who reviews that I do. Appeasing the YouTube algorithm is the easiest way to help my channel, however, you can directly support it via Patreon, and I'd like to give a shout out to my patrons. They're the names who are scrolling down here on the screen right now, these beautiful gits. Many of them are part of a Discord server, all of them got early access to these reviews, and I'd like to give a shout out to these particular patrons: Adam Grattan, Ben Langdon, Callum Baird, Chiba City Blues, Dan the Dreamer Shill, Daniel Davis, Darkstar2189, Darren Carver-Bausiger, Dean Jones, Dr. Hadley, Dragonbugs, Dylan Whitaker, Evil Dalek 79, Finley Rude, I've never read that name before. Flippant. That's the first time I've said that name. I'm sorry if I got it wrong. Ginger Animator, James Ivory, Joseph Adams, Lard Dragon Ezra, Leela, Maria Bergman, Mario Fanboy 15, Matthew Perry, Michael Serrano, Miranda Logan, Nate Harris, Palex, Pat Andrews, Randall Sprinkle, Raven Woods, Reese Lloyd, Ross, Ryan Duncan, Samuel Whitaker, Scott Gerard, The Brit Sniper, The Doctor 14 Blu-ray Reviews, Timbo 1834, Toby Loxton, Will, and William Baker. Thank you so much to my patrons, thanks to you for sticking around so long, and I'll see you folks next time.